You're sitting there right now, maybe worried, maybe anxious, maybe carrying a burden that feels so heavy you don't know how you're going to make it through another day. And I want you to stop for a moment. Just stop. Because what if I told you that the very thing you're struggling with, the very problem that's keeping you awake at night, doesn't need you to solve it at all? What if the answer isn't in trying harder, pushing more, or figuring it all out with your limited perspective? What if the answer is in letting go? There's a force in this universe, a power that created galaxies and stars, that makes your heart beat without you thinking about it, that grows trees from tiny seeds and heals cuts on your skin without any conscious effort from you. This same intelligence, this same divine power is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when you get your life together, not when you're more spiritual or more worthy. Right now, exactly as you are. But here's what we do. We block it. We get in our own way. We think we have to control everything. We think we have to have all the answers. We think that if we don't worry, if we don't stress, if we don't carry this burden, somehow things will fall apart. And that's the greatest illusion we live under. That's the lie that keeps us trapped in suffering. When you try to control everything, when you grip life with tight fists, when you insist that things must go your way and only your way, you're actually cutting yourself off from the infinite intelligence that wants to work through you. You're like someone standing in a river, dying of thirst, but refusing to drink because they want to control the direction of the water first. Let me tell you something that changed everything for me, and I know it can change everything for you too. There's a difference between taking action and taking control. There's a difference between doing your part and thinking you have to do everything. Your job is to show up, to be present, to do what's in front of you with love and dedication. But the outcome, the how it all works out, the timing, that's not your job. That's where you have to trust. That's where you have to let God handle it. And when I say God, I'm not talking about some distant deity sitting on a cloud judging you. I'm talking about the source of all creation, the intelligence that orchestrates everything, the love that holds it all together. Call it God, call it the universe, call it the Tao, call it whatever resonates with you. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that you recognize there's something far greater than your ego at work here. Your ego will tell you that you're alone. Your ego will tell you that if you don't worry, nothing will get done. Your ego will tell you that you need to control every detail or everything will fall apart. But your ego is scared. Your ego is operating from fear. And fear is what keeps you separate from peace. When you truly let God handle it, when you truly surrender the outcome, something miraculous happens. Peace washes over you, not because your problems disappeared, not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because you're no longer at war with what is. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable. You're no longer living in the anxiety of thinking everything depends on you. Think about the times in your life when you were most at peace. I bet they weren't the times when everything was perfect. They were the times when you accepted what was happening, when you trusted that somehow, some way, things would work out. They were the times when you stopped fighting reality and started flowing with it. There's a beautiful surrender that happens when you realize you're not in charge of the universe. There's a freedom in knowing that your job is simply to be the best version of yourself, to act from love, to do what's right in front of you, and then to release your attachment to how it all turns out. And when I say God, I'm not talking about some distant deity sitting on a cloud judging you. I'm talking about the source of all creation, the intelligence that orchestrates everything, the love that holds it all together. Call it God, call it the universe, call it the Tao, call it whatever resonates with you. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that you recognize there's something far greater than your ego at work here. Your ego will tell you that you're alone. Your ego will tell you that if you don't worry, nothing will get done. Your ego will tell you that you need to control every detail or everything will fall apart. But your ego is scared. Your ego is operating from fear. And fear is what keeps you separate from peace. When you truly let God handle it, when you truly surrender the outcome, something miraculous happens. Peace washes over you, not because your problems disappeared, not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because you're no longer at war with what is. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable. You're no longer living in the anxiety of thinking everything depends on you. Think about the times in your life when you were most at peace. I bet they weren't the times when everything was perfect. They were the times when you accepted what was happening, when you trusted that somehow, some way, things would work out. They were the times when you stopped fighting reality and started flowing with it. There's a beautiful surrender that happens when you realize you're not in charge of the universe. There's a freedom in knowing that your job is simply to be the best version of yourself, to act from love, to do what's right in front of you, and then to release your attachment to how it all turns out. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like giving up. This sounds like being passive. This sounds like I'm supposed to just sit around and do nothing while I wait for God to fix my life. And that couldn't be further from the truth. This isn't about being passive. This is about being present. This is about acting from inspiration rather than desperation. This is about doing what you're called to do and then trusting the process. When you're constantly worried, when you're constantly stressed, when you're constantly trying to control everything, you're actually less effective. You make poor decisions because you're operating from fear. You miss opportunities because you're too busy trying to force your own plan. You push people away because you're so wrapped up in your own anxiety that you can't be present with them. But when you let God handle it, when you trust that there's a bigger plan, when you surrender the outcome, you become incredibly powerful. Not powerful in the ego sense, but powerful in the way that water is powerful. Water doesn't fight, water flows. Water finds a way around obstacles. Water is soft, yet it can carve through stone over time. That's the kind of power that comes from surrender. Every single person listening to me right now has something they're worried about. Maybe it's money, maybe it's health, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your job, and you've been carrying this worry like it's your responsibility to solve it all by yourself. You've been losing sleep over it. You've been making yourself sick over it. You've been letting it steal your peace, your joy, your presence. What if today, right now, you made a different choice? What if you said, I've done everything I can do. I've taken the actions I need to take, and now I'm going to trust. I'm going to let go. I'm going to let God handle this. Do you know what would happen? You'd feel lighter immediately. Not because the problem went away, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of thinking you have to solve it all by yourself. There's a story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came and said, "Oh, what terrible luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back with 3 wild horses. The neighbors said, "Oh, what wonderful luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses and broke his leg. The neighbors said, "Oh, what terrible luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, soldiers came to take young men for war, but they didn't take his son because of his broken leg. The neighbors said, "Oh, what wonderful luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." This story illustrates something profound. We don't know what's good or bad. We don't know how things are going to work out. We don't know what's coming next. And yet we spend so much energy judging everything, labeling everything, trying to control everything based on our limited perspective. The farmer understood something essential. He understood that there's a bigger picture, a larger intelligence at work, and his job wasn't to judge or control, but simply to respond to what was right in front of him. When you let God handle it, you're acknowledging that there's a wisdom far greater than yours, orchestrating events. You're acknowledging that what looks like a setback might be a setup. You're acknowledging that what looks like a closed door might be protection from something you can't see yet. You're acknowledging that you don't have all the information, and that's okay. I spent years of my life trying to control everything. I had plans. I had goals. I had specific ideas about how things should unfold. And you know what? I was miserable. I was constantly disappointed because life rarely matched my expectations. I was constantly anxious because I was trying to force outcomes. I was constantly frustrated because people weren't behaving the way I wanted them to. And then something shifted. I started to understand that I could set intentions, I could take action, I could do my part, but I didn't have to control the outcome. I started to trust that there was an intelligence guiding everything, including the things that looked like mistakes or failures. I started to see that every experience, even the painful ones, was teaching me something, shaping me, preparing me for something greater. That's when peace came, not because my life became perfect, but because I stopped fighting with reality. I stopped insisting that life meet my expectations. I stopped thinking I knew better than the universe about how things should unfold. You see, when you're aligned with this divine intelligence, when you're flowing with it rather than against it, life becomes easier. Not because there are no challenges, but because you're no longer exhausting yourself by resisting what is. You're no longer creating additional suffering on top of whatever difficulty you're facing. There's pain in life. That's unavoidable. Loss happens. Disappointment happens. Things don't always work out the way we want. But suffering is optional. Suffering is what we add when we refuse to accept what is. Suffering is what we create when we insist that reality should be different than it is. Suffering is what happens when we fight against the flow of life rather than moving with it. When God steps in, when you allow that divine presence to work in your life, peace follows because you're no longer at war. You're no longer battling against what is. You're no longer carrying the impossible burden of thinking you have to control everything. Now, how do you actually do this? How do you let God handle it in a practical way? It starts with awareness. It starts with noticing when you're trying to control something you can't control. It starts with catching yourself in the worry, in the anxiety, in the need to have all the answers right now. When you notice it, you simply pause. You take a breath, and you say something like, I release this. I trust that there's a bigger plan. I've done what I can do, and now I let go of the outcome. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a long ritual. It's simply a conscious choice to surrender control. And then, here's the key, you have to actually let it go. You can't say the words and then immediately go back to worrying. You can't say you trust and then spend the next 3 hours playing out every possible negative scenario in your mind. Letting go means actually letting go. And yes, you might have to do it 100 times a day at first. Every time the worry comes back, you notice it, you breathe, and you release it again. Over time, something beautiful happens. Your nervous system starts to relax. Your mind starts to quiet. You start to notice the present moment more. You start to see opportunities you were missing before because you were so focused on your worries. You start to feel lighter, freer, more alive. And here's what's really amazing. When you stop trying to force outcomes, when you stop gripping life so tightly, things often work out better than you could have planned, because you're allowing the infinite intelligence of the universe to work through you rather than blocking it with your limited perspective and your fear-based thinking. There's a flow to life. There's a natural unfolding. And when you're in harmony with it, when you're trusting it, when you're allowing it, you're carried along by a current much stronger than anything you could create on your own. You're supported by a power that knows exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, exactly how to get you where you're meant to be. But you have to get out of the way. You have to stop thinking you know better. You have to stop insisting on your timeline, your plan, your way. You have to humble yourself enough to admit that there's a wisdom far beyond yours at work. This doesn't mean you become passive. This doesn't mean you stop setting goals or taking action. It means you hold your plans lightly. It means you take inspired action and then release attachment to specific outcomes. It means you do your best and trust the rest. Think about nature. A tree doesn't worry about whether it's growing fast enough. A bird doesn't stress about whether it will find food. A flower doesn't obsess about whether it's beautiful enough. They simply do what they're designed to do, and they trust the intelligence that created them to provide what they need. You are part of nature too. You're not separate from this intelligence. You're an expression of it. And just like the tree, the bird, and the flower, you have everything you need within you, and the universe is conspiring to support you. But you have to trust it. You have to allow it. You have to stop blocking it with your fear and your need for control. When you're constantly worried about money, you're sending a message to the universe that you don't trust it to provide for you. When you're constantly trying to control your relationships, you're sending a message that you don't trust people to be who they are. When you're constantly obsessing about the future, you're sending a message that you don't trust this moment to be enough. What if you sent a different message? What if you lived as if you trusted? What if you acted as if you knew, without a doubt, that everything was working out for your highest good? How would that change the way you move through your day? How would that change the decisions you make? How would that change the energy you bring to your relationships? I can tell you from experience, it changes everything. When you truly trust, when you truly let God handle it, you show up differently. You're calmer, you're more present, you're more loving, you're more creative, you're more open to possibilities. You're less reactive and more responsive. You're less fearful and more faith-filled. And this is what brings peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of trust. Not a life without challenges, but a heart that remains open and peaceful regardless of circumstances. Not a guarantee that everything will go your way, but a deep knowing that whatever happens, you'll be okay, because you're not alone, you're not in charge, and there's a love holding it all together that's far greater than any problem you could face. You know, we waste so much energy trying to predict the future. We create scenarios in our minds, usually worst-case scenarios, and then we react to those imaginary situations as if they're real. We lose sleep over things that haven't happened and might never happen. We create suffering for ourselves by living in a future that doesn't exist. But when you let God handle it, you come back to now. You come back to this moment. You come back to what's actually true right now, not what might be true tomorrow or next week or next year. And what's true right now is almost always okay. Right now, in this moment, you're breathing. You're alive. You have what you need for this moment. The future will take care of itself when it arrives. And when it does arrive, it won't be the future anymore. It will be now. And in that now, you'll have what you need. You'll have the strength, the wisdom, the resources, the support, but you can't access any of that from the past or the future. You can only access it now. So when worry comes, when anxiety rises, when you feel yourself trying to control something you can't control, come back to now. Ask yourself, what do I need to do right now? What's the next right action? What's in front of me in this moment? And do that, just that, nothing more. This is how you let God handle it. You do what's yours to do in this moment, and you trust that the rest is being taken care of. You take the next step you can see, and you trust that the step after that will reveal itself when you need it. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to take the first step, and then the next one, and then the next one. And before you know it, you've climbed higher than you ever thought possible, not because you could see the whole way, but because you trusted enough to keep taking the next step. This is faith. Not blind faith, but trust based on recognizing that the same intelligence that's orchestrating the planets and growing the flowers and beating your heart is also guiding your life. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to see it. You just have to trust it. And when you do, when you really do, peace comes. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that isn't shaken by difficulties. A peace that runs so much deeper than anything the world can give you or take from you. A peace that comes from knowing you're held, you're loved, you're guided, and you're never alone. The ego wants you to think you're separate, isolated, on your own. The ego wants you to believe that if you don't worry, if you don't control, if you don't force, everything will fall apart. But that's a lie. That's the voice of fear. And fear cannot coexist with trust. When you choose trust, fear loses its power over you. When you choose to let God handle it, anxiety can't get a foothold. When you choose surrender, you're actually choosing the most powerful position there is, because you're aligning yourself with the infinite rather than limiting yourself to your finite perspective. Think about the people in your life who are most at peace. They're not the ones who have everything figured out. They're not the ones who have perfect lives. They're the ones who have learned to trust. They're the ones who have learned to flow with life rather than fight against it. They're the ones who have learned that they don't have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. You can be one of those people. You can choose peace. You can choose trust. You can choose to let God handle it. And it starts right now with whatever you're worried about, whatever you're trying to control, whatever burden you're carrying that isn't yours to carry. What if you just put it down? What if you just said, I'm done trying to figure this out on my own. I'm done trying to force this. I'm done exhausting myself with worry. I trust that there's a bigger plan. I trust that I'm being guided. I trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it needs to. Can you feel what happens in your body when you even consider that possibility? Can you feel the softening, the release, the relief? That's what's available to you. Not someday, not when everything is perfect. Right now. You don't have to have strong faith. You don't have to be perfectly spiritual. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing to try a different way. Willing to release control. Willing to trust that there's something bigger than your ego guiding your life. And I promise you, when you make this shift, when you truly let God handle it, everything changes. Not necessarily your circumstances, although those often improve too. But the way you experience your circumstances changes completely. The same situation that was causing you so much stress and anxiety becomes manageable because you're not facing it alone anymore. You're not carrying it alone anymore. You're not trying to solve it alone anymore. You're partnering with the infinite. You're allowing divine intelligence to work through you. You're opening yourself to solutions you couldn't have thought of on your own. You're creating space for miracles. And miracles happen when you get out of the way. Miracles happen when you stop blocking the flow with your fear and your need for control. Miracles happen when you align yourself with love rather than fear, with trust rather than doubt, with surrender rather than resistance. This is not a one-time choice. This is a daily practice. This is a moment-by-moment decision. Every time worry arises, you have a choice. You can go down the familiar path of anxiety and control, or you can choose the path of trust and surrender. Every time fear whispers its lies, you can choose whether to believe it or to remember the truth of who you are and whose you are. You are not a mistake. You are not alone. You are not unsupported. You are a beloved creation of the divine, and there is an intelligence guiding your life that knows exactly what it's doing, even when you don't understand it, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's hard. Your job is to show up with love. Your job is to be present. Your job is to do what's in front of you with integrity and kindness. Your job is to be a channel for the divine, not a barrier to it. And then let God handle the rest. When God steps in, when you truly allow that presence to work in your life, peace follows. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you're no longer fighting. Not because all your problems disappear, but because you're no longer facing them from a place of fear and separation. Not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you've realized you don't need all the answers. You just need to trust the one who does. So today, right now, make that choice. Whatever you've been holding on to so tightly, whatever you've been trying to control, whatever burden you've been carrying, put it down, release it, let it go. Trust that there's a bigger plan. Trust that you're exactly where you need to be. Trust that everything is working out for your highest good, even if you can't see it yet. And then notice the peace that comes. Notice the lightness. Notice the freedom. Notice how much more present you can be when you're not lost in worry about the future. Notice how much more love you can give when you're not consumed by anxiety. Notice how much more alive you feel when you're not exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable. This is your birthright. Peace is your natural state. You just have to remove the barriers you've placed between yourself and it. You have to stop blocking it with your ego's demands and your fear's whispers. You have to choose trust over control, surrender over resistance, faith over fear. And when you do, when you really do, you'll understand what it means to let God handle it. You'll understand that it's not about being passive or giving up. It's about being powerful in a completely different way. It's about aligning yourself with the infinite rather than limiting yourself to your finite understanding. It's about partnering with the divine rather than trying to do it all yourself. This is the path to peace. This is the way to freedom. This is how you stop suffering and start living. Let God handle it. Trust the process. Surrender the outcome. Do your part with love and dedication, and then release your attachment to how it all turns out. When you live this way, when you really live this way, everything shifts. Your relationships improve because you're not trying to control people. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're acting from inspiration rather than desperation. Your health improves because you're not making yourself sick with stress. Your whole life transforms because you're finally flowing with life rather than fighting against it. And the peace that comes is beyond anything the world can give you. It's a peace that sustains you through difficulty. It's a peace that holds you when everything around you is changing. It's a peace that comes from knowing, truly knowing, that you're held by a love that will never let you go. So let God handle it. Trust that you're being guided. Believe that there's a bigger plan. Know that you're not alone. And watch as peace follows, not because everything becomes perfect, but because you're no longer at war with what is. You're finally home in this moment, trusting the process, surrendering the outcome, and allowing the divine to work through you in ways more beautiful than you could have ever planned. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity. This is your moment to choose differently. Will you take it? Will you let go? Will you trust? Will you allow God to handle what only God can handle? The choice is yours. And in that choice lies your freedom, your peace, and your power. Choose wisely. Choose trust. Choose surrender. Choose peace. And watch your life transform in ways you never thought possible.